Hi there, welcome back to the last lesson in cut paper sculpture with me, Maeve Clancy, for Roscommon Art Centre. So in the first two lessons we learned how to fold and cut and to make a few different designs based on decorative arts around King House in Boyle. So here I have made 4 different designs, so I think 2 of these I made in the last class and 2 are new ones. So just to show some of the different designs you can make using the techniques we did in the first 2 lessons. So here are the first 2 I think you've seen already. And now I have 2 more. One reasonably complicated, just using some of the rosettes and extra bits of design I put in, and a kind of more simple one. Okay, so I have 4 of those to start off with. What I'm going to do now is work to assemble them. So you need to stick together to make the final artwork. So you can take individual pieces and assemble them through gluing to make one large piece. So the other thing that I need is just a load of sheets of plain paper. So we've been using A4 photocopy paper. I've got lots of plain and I have my 4 cutout designs. So what I do is I take one of my designs, and what I want to do is start assembling it with the plain sheets. So I start lining it up. So the first thing I do is I take one of the plain sheets and think about how I'm going to stick these 2 together. So I'm going to make an artwork that is reasonably long, so I can have it as a long hanging artwork, or I can make it into a cylinder one that can hang. So I want to stick these together. Now I don't want to stick too far down because I don't want to lose too much of my design. I'm going to use a little bit of a glue stick, and I just put a little bit of glue along the bottom of the plain bit, and I want to stick my first design to the lower half. Okay, you can stick this any which way you want, but just use the existing plain paper, and what it's going to do is it's going to make the whole artwork larger, but it's also going to make it stronger by using sheets of solid paper that have no cutout. Every time you do a paper cutout, you weaken the paper a little bit. So it's necessary sometimes to strengthen it by adding a little bit of solid paper to it, just to strengthen it up. So here I'm taking another piece of paper, and instead of sticking a full A4 sheet, I'm just going to stick a half, which is going to be A5. And it's to vary up where my designs go. So I don't want to just stick my designs at diagonal angles so they all look the same. I want to place them in slightly different places to each other so that the finished design looks a little more interesting. So here I'm again just cutting it, measuring it, decide where I want it to go. When I'm doing cut paper, I work an awful lot by measuring with the paper itself and deciding where I need it to go. I often cut a straight line by folding it and then cutting with my scissors. So I don't use a ruler an awful lot with this. And with paper which has square edges, you don't really need to. You just use the paper itself to measure and to get the right angle. So now I've stuck 2 pieces of solid white on, and I'm going to add my second cutout design. Okay, so this is what I would call assembly. So assembly just means to bring things together, to assemble. And I'm deciding where I want things to go and where I want them to sit next to each other. So you can see here I'm moving this along because I don't want things to sit at really regular spaces, I guess. And I'm just working it out as I go. Now if I'm going to place that somewhere, I need to mark where it's going to go before I put my glue on. So you can see here with my pencil, I'm just marking where the corner of the paper is, where it hits the 2 edges, so that when I lift my design off and I go to put my glue on, I know I can see the space that the glue is going to fit into. So you can see here I'm adding the glue in here, just there, and I'm going to add it up the side, and I want to make sure I cover all the area that it's going to fit onto. I think that glue is probably running out. I'll make a new one next. So I add the glue, and I use the same markings to place my design back on. So generally speaking, if I have put pencil markings like this on, that becomes the back of my design as opposed to the front. So there I have sticking it on. Now I am going to speed this up a little bit, I think, and I'm going to add these on a little quicker. So exactly as before, every time I speed up the lesson, I'm going to write it on screen. I'll probably say it as well. So you can see here, I'm adding my other designs, and that one there, I turned on its side to add it. And also I'm trying to make sure I don't put things at too regular intervals so that the spaces, it doesn't look super even. And then I cut out a piece of paper to fit the gap. Okay, so as I said before, I'm measuring my pieces of paper by just holding them up, folding them and cutting them. Okay, so here I want to put another piece of paper at the end of my design cutout piece to strengthen it up a little bit. Oh, I'm going to put a piece here. Put a bit of glue on and then place it on. Okay, and then I'm taking my last cutout design and trying to figure out where I want it to go. So as before, I'm measuring with my pencil where I want it to go, and then I'm sticking it down. Okay, any gap I have, I just cut out a little piece of paper that fits in and off I go. Okay, so with this you can see I've left a good gap up the top. I need to fill that gap, so as before I'm measuring the paper and fitting it in. Okay, so I've sped this up quite fast, mainly because I'm doing the same thing again and again, and that is measuring, marking it with the pencil, and then gluing it down. You can see here I'm keeping an eye on where I have design and just making sure that I'm fitting it out around it. Okay, so make sure things fit in the right place before you stick them down. So measure them, draw it with the pencil, place it back down after cutting it out and make sure it all fits in. And then use a last piece of paper to fill your last gap. Okay, so I'm doing the same thing every time, measuring by eye, folding and cutting, marking with the pencil, and then I've got my piece. So you can see here I've one large piece, which I'm going to show you, and it's one long piece. It's got my 4 cutout designs in it, and the rest is just filled up by those plain sheets of A4 paper. So it looks like one large piece from a distance, but it's actually your individual designs cut out by hand. So once you've done those, we're going to look at 2 different ways of hanging this. Hanging option 1 is adding a bar. So a bar is something that is a nice structure up the top and lets us hang it. So the first thing I do with my artwork is I'm going to punch holes in it. So with paper, one of the easiest ways to attach paper or elastic or whatever you're going to hang it with is a puncher. So I have a single hole puncher here, you can see, but you probably have one that maybe punches 2 holes at once. You can use a regular puncher. Here I've sped it up a little bit. I just have a single hole one, which is really easy to use because I use these all the time. And what I do is I try to put my holes pretty evenly spaced. If I think I've got too big a gap, I just add an extra hole. Okay. Now what I'm going to use is this piece of bamboo. So this is the piece of bamboo you can buy in a garden centre. You might have a stick at home. Any stick you have that fits the right length. It might be an old bar, an old handle. I find bamboo great because it's long. It's not super straight, but it is. It's really light, which is handy. Next thing, I'm going to cut some pieces of twine. So I have a string here, and I'm just going to cut a load of pieces of twine, and I'm going to use those to tie my bamboo. So I've sped that up quite a bit. I'm going to use those to tie my bamboo onto the paper. Okay, so there's one of my pieces of twine. I'm going to put it through my first little hole there, and I'm going to line them up to get them all ready. Okay, so you can see I'm just lining it up by putting it through from behind, and then it goes through. So I'll speed these up to do a load of these together. I find it easier if I put all the pieces of string in before I start. It's an awful lot easier to tie them all at the same time, okay? Because you kind of need the string in place before you tie them. So if you tie one at a time, it can be difficult to get the next piece of string in, okay? So I'm just tying up my string, reasonably simple. Don't tie crazy tight. Make sure you're not ripping your paper as you go, but if you do it carefully enough, you shouldn't rip the paper. Sometimes people use, instead of using bamboo, you can use something like a rail you can get in the hardware, like it's almost like a dado rail, but a piece called a slip, which you can tie around. I like bamboo. I find tying around a circular bar works better than something that's got square edges and can kind of cut a little bit actually. So now I'm cutting off the edges of my string, and also I'm just tightening up all my little knots as I go, just to make sure they're reasonably tight. I cut the string not right at the knot, but a little bit off so that it's nice and neat. So the bar is going to go to the back, and I want to make sure it's nice and neat when I go to hang my artwork. So cut off the last few little pieces of string there, get rid of them, and once they're done, there we have my artwork. So what I've done is I've just tied one extra piece of string from 2 of those holes, and I've hung it on my wall. And you can see from that, with the hanging cut paper artwork, a little bit of distance from the wall works really nicely. So that naturally comes out a little bit because of the bamboo, and there's a nice shadow behind it on the wall. So our next option is making it into a cylinder, which is a bit more complicated, but it's worth trying out if you've made 1 or 2 of these. So you start by taking two pieces of card. So this is just a reasonably thick card, and I've cut it out to two strips, and I just want to attach them to each other. So I want to make one long strip, and from this one long strip I'm going to make essentially like a hoop, and that hoop will hold up the artwork in a cylinder shape. So I'm just using my ruler to make sure I'm sticking it together quite straight. And what I'm going to do now is I need to look at my artwork, which already has holes punched in it, and I want to make sure I make holes on my hoop that are in exactly the same place. So because I'm going to stick this strip of cardboard into together to itself, I need to leave a little bit at the edge. So you can see here on the right, I'm leaving a little distance, and that is so that I can stick it back onto itself. And I'm going to use the artwork to mark where I'm meant to punch the next hole. So because this hoop is going to be made out of cardboard, I'm going to punch holes. So I make the first three, and you can see here, I realize I've probably put them too far in for my puncher. So I move it a little closer down and keep making sure I put them in the right place. And I'm going to mark all the holes for the whole length of my hoop. So I get rid of the ones I don't want, and now I should have all the spaces to get my puncher and punch my holes. Punch them the whole way along, and there are all the holes, which when I put it down, I just need to make sure that they definitely match up with the holes in my artwork. So they're pretty good, okay, and they match up the whole way along. So what I do now is exactly the same as the way I assembled last time. I just take some string, I open it up, and I'm going to cut a load of lengths of my string. So I'm going to cut a load of lengths here, do that quite quickly. And you can see here, I make sure you cut them long enough that it's easy to tie them together, but not so long that you're losing loads of string at the end. So I always, with paper, just be very careful when you're tying together, okay? This is a time when it's most easy to rip the artwork. So just take your time gently, and it's even putting in string and placing things together. Just take your time, do it gently. You can see here I've sped it up so it looks like I'm going faster, but I actually did this quite slowly, okay? Get them in, and once you have it tied together, the work is completed really quickly. Okay, so all my pieces of string are in, so exactly like with the bamboo, put all your pieces of string in place and then gently tie them. Okay, decide what side of the card you want the paper to go. So you can see I've got the paper overlapping up into my cards a little bit, so this is going to be the back. So where my knots are, as before, are going to be the back of the artwork. Okay, so if you've got pencil marks on your artwork, put them on this side. Okay, so again, I've sped up really fast, but I'm actually tying those quite slowly and really carefully. So take your time. Take your time, do it carefully, get it right, and don't rip your paper. Now you can see here, I'm cutting off the ends of the knots again and just tidying everything up. Okay, so what you're doing is you're attaching your artwork to this piece of cardboard that you're then going to stick into a hoop. Okay. So I'm filming from a different angle here because I'm going to show you how I'm going to put this into hoops. So that's my entire artwork tied to the piece of cardboard. So you can see here, I'm just making sure to overlap a little bit. So I'm pulling the cardboard together to make it into a hoop. I'm making sure that I overlap the paper artwork at the bottom. And what I want to do is attach this. Now you can glue it, but I often attach in the same way as I attach everything by cutting a hole with the puncher between two layers, taking a piece of string, and I'm going to tie it together with the piece of string. And the reason I do that is if I change my mind about how I want this assembled, I can simply just cut the piece of string and my artwork is open and flat again. So it allows you to use your artwork as a cylinder, as a flat. You can try it a few different ways, and it doesn't make any difference to the artwork if it's permanent or temporary. So I often keep it kind of temporary assembled or put together, and then I can change it whenever I want. As long as it's a strong enough assembly, as long as it's held together strong enough, I'm very happy to make it something that I can change at a later time. So exactly as before, I just punched through the two layers of cardboard. I'm just tying it with the string. Okay. And by doing that, I have assembled the whole piece into one cylindrical shape. So what was a flat kind of artwork is now more like a three-dimensional sculpture. Okay, so if you think about all of this artwork came from taking an A4 page, folding it and cutting into it. So you can start with something really, really simple. And then using a little bit of inspiration, which we did from King House, you can create a really interesting 3D artwork. So with this, across the top of the hoop, I've left the first 2 holes, and I've cut some extra holes here with my puncher. And the reason I cut extra holes with the puncher is I want to be able to hang this artwork. So I want to be able to attach string, as I'm doing here, and hang it up. So I'm just tying a long piece of string in one side, and then I'm measuring across, and I'm going to tie it the opposite side. So I'm basically tying in string that's going to allow me to hang it from the center. So I tie the second piece of string on, and the way I'm doing this is I'm making it not taut straight across. I'm tying it so it's a little bit loose, so it'll have a little bit of something to hang from. And then once that's done, here I am speeding it up. I'm going to attach 2 more pieces of string. So I'm adding one on here that goes across to the opposite side. If I find that where I want to put it is there's no hole, I just add a new hole on. You can see that I've done that there, and I'm tying it on really quickly, but not as quick as this sped up version. And for me, you can tie 2 pieces for hanging. I like to tie 3. I find it puts a little less pressure on the cylinder. But see what works for you. The great thing about working in paper is that you can try something. If it doesn't work, you cut it off, or you retie it, and you can experiment until you find what works best for you. So here I'm just cutting the spare bits of string at the end, and I should have 3 strings going across, which looks like 6 pieces. I'm tying an extra piece on top, and that's the piece I can hang with. So here you can see my hanging artwork, just hanging off my desk, and it makes my flat cut paper cutouts look quite 3-dimensional. Okay. If you want to make it more even, you can add another cylinder to the bottom, and here's just some photos of that taken from a few different angles. So that's the end of my cut paper sculpture series, 3 lessons. I really hope you enjoyed it, and good luck with all your artworks.